He thought she'd beg. He thought cheating on his pregnant wife would go unnoticed. But when she found out, she smiled. Then vanished with everything: the house, the money, and their unborn child. This isn't a story of loud revenge. It's the story of a woman who destroyed him with silence. And trust me, it's brutal. The rain tapped steadily against the window as Claire Jennings stood in the doorway of their shared master bedroom, her hands resting gently on her growing belly. The soft hum of her baby's heartbeat still echoed in her ears from this morning's prenatal appointment, a moment she dreamed of for years. She should have been glowing, smiling, but instead something sat heavy in her chest, suffocating and cold. She stared at the half-buttoned shirt tossed lazily over the edge of the bed. It wasn't hers. More precisely, it was her husband's, but the scent wafting from it definitely wasn't. It was floral, sweet. Not the usual lingering scent of his cologne or the laundry detergent she bought. This was different, exotic, feminine. And Claire knew instinctively, irrevocably, she wasn't the one he'd been with. She picked it up slowly, bringing it close to her nose, her breath shallow. Jasmine. Vanilla. A perfume she didn't own and would never choose. The baby kicked. Claire closed her eyes, gently running a hand over her belly. I'll protect you, she thought, her pulse icy beneath her skin. Across the house, she heard the front door open and the jingle of keys hitting the dish by the entrance. Her husband's familiar voice called out. Claire. She didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, she folded the shirt in perfect silence, laid it gently on his pillow, and sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap. Composed. Hey, Marcus said as he appeared in the doorway, shaking rain off his coat. You okay? You look pale. Claire gave him a small smile. The kind that didn't reach her eyes. Doctor said everything's fine. Healthy heartbeat. Strong baby. Marcus crossed the room and kissed her on the forehead, then moved to change his clothes. She watched him. Watched the way he paused when he saw the shirt laid out neatly, how his eyes flickered with something like panic before smoothing it over with a forced smile. That's dirty, he said, reaching for it. I meant to throw it in the laundry. I figured, Claire said coolly. It smells different. He froze for a second, just a beat. What do you mean? He shrugged. Nothing. Just a strong perfume. He chuckled too loudly. Probably from hugging one of my clients. You know how handsy some of them are. Claire nodded. Said nothing. But in that moment her silence was louder than any confrontation. The next day, Claire sat across from her best friend and former roommate, Elise, at a cozy coffee shop just outside of town. Elise had known Claire since college, since before Marcus had swept in with his charming smile and calculated ambitions. He's cheating, Elise said bluntly without even a pause. You know it. You felt it. Claire stirred her tea, eyes fixed on the swirling liquid. I don't want to believe it. Not while I'm pregnant. Claire, listen to me. The moment you stop trusting your gut is the moment you lose control. And this baby? This baby needs a mother who isn't being played like a damn fool. Claire looked up at her. I don't have proof. Elise leaned forward, lowering her voice. Then let's get some. Over the next week, Elise helped Claire set the groundwork. Marcus had always been meticulous, his phone password changed often, his work trips timed perfectly, his stories clean and rehearsed. But nobody's perfect. And the bigger the lie, the sloppier the cracks. Claire began to notice them everywhere. A mysterious charge on their joint credit card from an expensive restaurant she'd never been to. An Uber trip late at night from a downtown address to a condo in a luxury complex. A lipstick mark on a coffee mug in his car's cup holder. Bright red. Claire wore muted tones. Always had. And then came the photo. Elise, clever as ever, used a friend from her marketing firm to track down Marcus's client. A woman named Natalie Rhodes. A lifestyle coach with an Instagram following and a penchant for dramatic selfies. On a random Wednesday night, Claire received a forwarded message from Elise. Attached was a photo snapped outside a dimly lit wine bar, Marcus and Natalie, laughing. Her hand on his chest. His body angled toward hers like she was the center of his world. Claire saved the photo silently. No tears. No screaming. Instead she began to plan. At home, Claire was quieter than usual. But more attentive too, sweet, doting even. Marcus noticed. You've been glowing lately, he told her one night, rubbing her back as she lay on the couch. I guess pregnancy suits me, she replied softly. He smiled, satisfied. Deluded. I've been thinking, Claire continued, maybe we should take a baby moon. One last getaway before the baby comes. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Now. Soon. Just a weekend. You pick the place. Really? He grinned. That's actually a great idea. She kissed him softly. I want to make memories before everything changes. And she meant it. Just not in the way he thought. 2 days later, while Marcus was at work, Claire met with a lawyer. A sharp, ruthless woman named Diana Gray, who specialized in high-stakes divorce. Elise had recommended her with one line, "She doesn't lose." Claire sat across from Diana, documents in hand, financial statements, credit reports, copies of photos, screenshots of texts she'd managed to pull from his synced email account. Everything meticulously labeled and indexed. "I want full custody," Claire said. "And I want him to suffer." Diana smiled like a shark. "Then let's begin." By the end of the week, Claire had quietly separated her finances, removed her name from unnecessary accounts, and arranged temporary housing under her maiden name. Marcus had no idea. And when he left for a business trip, that Saturday morning, bag packed, suit pressed, cologne heavier than usual, Claire kissed him goodbye and smiled sweetly. "Have fun," she whispered. That same afternoon, Claire drove to the luxury condo listed on their credit card statement. She waited, parked across the street. Watched. And then she saw them, Natalie exiting the building in a silk robe and slippers, blowing a kiss toward someone inside. Moments later, Marcus stepped out, adjusting his shirt, whistling to himself like a man without a care in the world. She took a photo. A video. Time-stamped, geotagged. When she returned home, she went straight to her laptop and drafted the email. To Marcus Jennings, subject. Read carefully. "You once told me I was the safest place you'd ever known. And I believed you. I believed everything. Until I smelled her perfume. Until I saw the lipstick. Until I watched you walk out of her apartment this morning like our vows were nothing more than background noise. You're not coming home to a wife anymore, Marcus. You're coming home to a legal notice. Check your inbox. Check your doorstep. And check yourself, because you're about to lose far more than you ever expected." With cold precision, Claire attached the divorce papers Diana had prepared. She hit send. Then she picked up her hospital bag, grabbed her keys and walked out the door without a single glance back. The sun filtered lazily through the blinds, casting warm stripes of light across the polished hardwood floors. Marcus Jennings stepped inside his quiet home, still humming the last lines of a song he'd heard in the car. He tossed his keys in the bowl by the door and set his suitcase down, already thinking about the text he would send Natalie later, something flirtatious, just enough to keep her entangled. He barely noticed the crisp white envelope waiting for him on the foyer table. But when he turned to head toward the kitchen, his eyes snagged on the bold black print. To Marcus Jennings, personal and confidential. He paused. Frowning, Marcus tore it open. Inside, a neatly bound stack of papers dropped into his hands like a stone. The first page read in bold letters, "Petition for divorce, Claire Jennings versus Marcus Jennings." He blinked once. Twice. His fingers trembled as he flipped through page after page, every detail stabbing him deeper. Infidelity. Emotional distress. Full custody request. Frozen assets. His chest tightened. His mouth went dry. "No," he muttered, backing into the wall, staring at the pages as though they'd catch fire in his hands. And then, like a dam breaking, came the voice. Clear. Unmistakably hers. "You've been served." Marcus turned sharply. Claire stood by the archway in the kitchen, arms crossed over her swollen belly. Her face was unreadable, no tears, no screams, no cracked voice. Just composure. What is this?" he sputtered, lifting the documents. Claire took a step forward, her eyes never leaving his. "It's everything you thought you were getting away with. On paper." He looked lost, desperate. "Claire, wait, can we talk about this? It's not what it looks like." She gave a quiet laugh, sharp, humorless. "Don't insult my intelligence, Marcus. I've watched you walk into her condo. I've seen the texts, the receipts, the Uber trips, the dinner reservations, her lipstick, her perfume. You didn't even try to hide it." He opened his mouth, but no words came. "You could have left, Marcus," Claire continued, stepping closer. "If you were unhappy, you could have walked out like a man. But instead you humiliated me, lied to me, risked the safety of your unborn child for your ego." Marcus tried to reach for her hand, but she stepped back like he was a disease. "I was going to tell you," he whispered. "I just didn't want to hurt you while you were pregnant." "Oh, how noble," she snapped, her voice laced with venom. "You were protecting me, while you were screwing her in hotel rooms and luxury condos, while I was attending prenatal checkups alone." Silence. Claire took a breath. Her next words were colder than before. You don't live here anymore. His eyes widened. What? She pointed to the documents. I've already filed. The house is under my name, Marcus. You signed it over when we refinanced. I've had the locks changed. You have exactly 15 minutes to pack a bag and leave. Or I call the police. But Claire, this is our home. You can't just. I can, she cut in. And I have. 10 minutes later, Marcus stumbled out of the house, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His car engine roared to life, but he sat behind the wheel frozen, his mind blank. He pulled out his phone, fingers trembling, and called Natalie. She didn't answer. He called again. Voicemail. By the time he drove to her condo, his chest felt like it might explode. He knocked furiously. Waited. Nothing. Finally, the door opened. Natalie stood in a satin robe, lips pursed. Marcus, she said flatly. What are you doing here? I need to talk to you. Claire knows. She's filed for divorce. Natalie blinked. Then smirked. I figured she would. His heart sank. You knew. She shrugged, leaning against the doorframe. She DM'd me. Weeks ago. Told me everything she had on you. Said she wasn't mad at me, just wanted to know how deep the lies ran. So I told her. Marcus staggered back like he'd been slapped. You what? Natalie sighed. Look, Marcus, I liked you. But I'm not about to ruin a pregnant woman's life for a fling. You said you were separated. That you were working on things. Turns out you were just a lying coward. She closed the door in his face. Over the next week, Marcus's world began to unravel. Claire froze their joint accounts. With Diana Gray leading the legal charge, every move Marcus made was checked, documented, and used against him. She filed for exclusive residency of the house and won it easily. Claire had photographic evidence of his infidelity, time-stamped proof of his neglect during her pregnancy, and glowing letters from her OB-GYN and friends vouching for her mental and physical health. Marcus was forced to move into a cheap corporate apartment an hour away from his job. He had no stable internet, no washer-dryer, and a noisy neighbor who played techno music until 2 a.m. At work, things weren't much better. Rumors of his affair spread like wildfire after someone anonymously posted screenshots of his texts with Natalie to the company's internal Slack group. His boss called him in for a meeting. We don't care what you do outside the office, the boss had said grimly, but when your personal life affects the company's reputation, especially with a client involved, it becomes our problem. The client? Natalie Rhodes. Marcus was suspended pending internal review. He returned to his apartment that night in a daze, unsure if it was sweat or tears clinging to his face. Meanwhile, Claire thrived. She had moved into a calm routine, prenatal yoga, therapy sessions, nesting. Elise came over often, bringing groceries, playing calming music, and helping her decorate the nursery. Every piece of it, the soft gray wallpaper, the rocking chair, the tiny clothes folded in drawers, was a declaration of independence. Of peace. Of building something for her child that Marcus would never taint. And Claire wasn't done yet. 2 weeks later, Marcus received an email from Claire's lawyer, a full breakdown of the custody request. Claire was filing for sole custody, citing emotional neglect, infidelity during pregnancy, and an unsafe environment. She had documented Marcus's absence from every major prenatal appointment, his refusal to attend birthing classes, and his suspicious financial transfers. His only chance at partial custody was agreeing to supervised visitation. Claire would not allow their child to spend the night with him until a court psychologist approved it. Marcus exploded. He called her 6 times. She didn't answer. Instead, she sent him a single text. Your child deserves better than a half-present man driven by ego. You'll never use our baby as leverage. Ever. What burned most wasn't just the loss of control. It was that Claire didn't cry. Didn't beg. Didn't even argue. She disappeared from his orbit entirely, untouchable. At night, he would lie awake in his apartment, staring at the ceiling, remembering the way Claire used to rub his back when he was stressed. The soft laughter they used to share while shopping for baby clothes. The way she used to trust him completely, stupidly. And he threw it all away. For what? Natalie had ghosted him. His job hung by a thread. His wife was now a storm he couldn't contain. One night, Marcus showed up at the house. He knocked over and over. Claire, please. Let me in. I'm sorry. I need to talk to you. After 5 minutes, the porch light flicked on. Claire stepped out holding a folder. She didn't look angry, just tired. You have no right to be here, she said quietly. I just want to talk. Please. I miss you. I miss us. Claire raised an eyebrow. You miss the life you destroyed? Marcus said nothing. She handed him the folder. Inside is the finalized parenting plan. Sign it or fight it in court. Either way, I'm done wasting energy on a man who thought I'd stick around after being cheated on while pregnant. He reached for her hand. Claire, she stepped back. Don't. He looked at her like a man watching everything slip away. Why are you doing this to me? Her laugh was soft, bitter. I'm not doing anything to you, Marcus. You did this to yourself. With that, she turned and shut the door. Of course, Marcus tries to fight back, but Claire always stays 2 steps ahead. Marcus stared at the signed parenting plan Claire had handed him the night before. The words blurred together as his mind raced. Supervised visitation. No overnight stays. Full custody to Claire. He threw the papers across the small kitchen of his corporate apartment. They fluttered down like broken wings. He couldn't lose everything. Not like this. He refused. The next morning, Marcus sat across from a divorce attorney. Not as polished as Diana Gray, he couldn't afford the best anymore, but aggressive enough. A man named Victor Kane, whose office smelled of stale coffee and desperation. You're saying she's trying to take everything? Victor asked, thumbing through the documents Marcus had brought. Marcus nodded. The house. Full custody. She even froze half the savings. I need to fight back. I want joint custody at least. Victor leaned back in his squeaky leather chair. Normally, the court favors joint custody, especially if the father fights for it. But adultery while your wife's pregnant? That's a tough one, Marcus. Judges don't like men who abandon their families emotionally. Bad optics. Marcus clenched his fists. There has to be something we can use against her. Victor shrugged. We can try to dig. Maybe paint her as emotionally unstable because of pregnancy hormones. Courts are cautious with newborns, though they tend to side with the primary caregiver unless you prove she's unfit. Marcus's heart sank. Claire didn't drink. She didn't party. She had no criminal record, no outbursts, no hospitalizations. She was the perfect image of a calm, capable mother. Victor drummed his fingers. Best we can do. Delay the divorce. File motions. Create a paper trail questioning her judgment. Maybe force her to spend money fighting it. Marcus latched onto the idea. If he couldn't win, he could at least make her bleed. Meanwhile, Claire anticipated every move before Marcus made it. Diana Gray had warned her. He'll try to drag it out. Men like him always do. They can't stand losing control. So Claire prepared. She collected every piece of evidence Marcus could twist. Proof of her sobriety, mental health evaluations signed by licensed therapists stating she was emotionally stable, testimonials from friends and neighbors who'd witnessed Marcus's absence during the pregnancy. Even her OB-GYN submitted a signed letter to the court emphasizing that Claire attended every checkup alone. That Marcus missed critical appointments. That stress from the abandonment had posed a serious risk to both mother and child. Claire wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her baby. And she would not lose. Marcus, however, still believed he could outmaneuver her. He showed up at a court-mandated mediation meeting smirking, dressed in a sharp suit he couldn't really afford anymore, accompanied by Victor Kane. Claire arrived alone, save for Diana Gray. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back neatly. She didn't look weak. She looked regal. Untouchable. The mediator, a soft-spoken woman named Lisa Hart, reviewed both proposals. Claire's request for sole custody, Marcus's desperate plea for 50-50. When Marcus's lawyer suggested Claire was emotionally volatile due to pregnancy hormones, Claire simply slid a folder across the table. Inside were her therapist's reports, perfectly documented, stating that Claire exhibited no signs of emotional instability, and that stressors present were external, rooted in the betrayal and abandonment by her spouse. Marcus flushed bright red. When Victor suggested that Marcus had been an involved partner, Claire produced a detailed calendar highlighting every prenatal appointment Marcus missed, complete with clinic receipts and timestamps. Each missed milestone was a nail in Marcus's coffin. By the end of the mediation session, the mediator offered Marcus a warning. If you force this to trial based on the evidence I've reviewed, the judge is likely to grant Ms. Jennings sole custody. I recommend you accept the current settlement terms. Marcus stormed out. Claire didn't even flinch. That night he spiraled deeper. He sat alone in his apartment, scrolling through old photos of him and Claire, their wedding, their vacations, silly selfies from when they were just dating. He remembered how fiercely she used to love him. How she once looked at him like he was her whole world. And he crushed it for a few nights of excitement. His phone buzzed. A message from Victor. Claire's lawyers filed a restraining order request. Stay away from her house unless scheduled visitation. Any contact could be used against you. Marcus laughed bitterly. He felt caged. Helpless. How had everything slipped so fast? Across town, Claire sat in the newly finished nursery. She rocked gently in the chair, rubbing her belly, feeling the tiny kicks. Elise sat on the floor assembling a toy organizer. You okay? Elise asked. Claire nodded. Better than I've been in months. Still scared. Sometimes, Claire admitted. But then I think about the life I'm building for us. A life without lies. Without betrayal. Elise smiled warmly. You're already the fiercest mother I know. Claire's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Diana Gray. She answered heart steady. Good news, Diana said without preamble. The court accepted the preliminary injunction. He can't come within 100 feet of you unless it's a supervised exchange for visitation. Also, the judge agreed to freeze the remaining joint accounts pending asset division. Claire closed her eyes in relief. Thank you, Diana. Don't thank me yet, Diana said. The best is yet to come. Claire opened her eyes, gaze firm. Let's finish this. Marcus, meanwhile, wasn't finished. Desperation made him stupid. Late one night, drunk and furious, he texted Claire. You ruined my life. You'll regret this. You're nothing without me. He passed out shortly after, not realizing that Claire had immediately forwarded the message to Diana. Or that Diana had immediately filed it with the court as evidence of harassment. At the next hearing, Marcus was reprimanded by the judge, and warned that any further incidents could result in temporary loss of visitation rights altogether. Victor leaned over to whisper furiously in Marcus's ear, You're handing her the case on a silver platter. Marcus slumped in his seat, feeling the world close in tighter around him. But the final blow didn't come from the court. It came from his own social circle. Claire had remained silent publicly, refusing to badmouth Marcus directly. But somehow, through whispered conversations, carefully leaked photos and quiet truths, everyone found out. Friends who used to invite Marcus to barbecues stopped answering his texts. Colleagues he once joked with over lunch gave him cold, pitying looks. His boss, eager to salvage the company's reputation, formally terminated his employment after mutual discussions. Natalie, the mistress who had once made him feel invincible, blocked him on everything. Marcus sat in his crumbling apartment, unemployed, broke, and utterly alone. His phone vibrated once more. It was an email. From Claire's lawyer. The subject line read, Final settlement agreement attached. Marcus opened it, heart pounding. Inside, the terms were crystal clear. Claire would retain full custody of their child. Marcus would receive supervised visitation rights bi-weekly, subject to review after 1 year. The house would remain Claire's property. Marcus would pay child support calculated based on his former salary. And if he refused to sign within 30 days? Claire's legal team would move to petition for full termination of parental rights based on emotional instability and harassment. Marcus dropped his phone. It clattered to the floor with a sharp crack, mirroring the final shatter of his once perfect life. Across town, Claire tucked herself into bed, one hand on her belly, a soft smile playing on her lips. She had done it. Not with screaming or vengeance or cruelty, but with precision. Patience. Marcus thought she would crumble. He thought betrayal would break her. Instead, she rose from the ashes stronger, colder, and more unstoppable than he could have ever imagined. And she was just getting started. Claire remains graceful while Marcus sinks further. Marcus Jennings hadn't shaved in 4 days. His apartment, once a temporary bachelor pad he pretended to enjoy, now smelled like instant noodles and old regrets. The laundry piled in corners. The blinds stayed closed. His phone, once buzzing with texts and business calls, now lay untouched and silent on the kitchen table, beside the last unopened letter from his attorney. He didn't need to open it. He knew what it said. Claire had won. She had won every battle and now she was winning the war. The final settlement deadline was looming. If he didn't sign, the court could move to terminate his visitation rights altogether. And yet, he still couldn't bring himself to sign. Not because he believed he could win, but because signing meant admitting it was truly over. That everything he'd gambled, his marriage, his home, his child, was gone. That he had burned down his entire life for a woman who'd blocked him the moment it got messy. He stared at the blank TV screen, his mind looping through all the wrong decisions. He remembered the first time he met Natalie. The flirty smiles. The ego boost. The way she laughed at his jokes like they were brilliant. She made him feel seen. Important. like the man he thought he deserved to be. But in the end, Natalie had disappeared the moment Claire took control. And Claire, the woman he had taken for granted, had become a storm, silent but deadly. Across town, Claire stood in the newly painted nursery, adjusting a star-shaped mobile above the crib. The room was calm, a soft blend of pale gray and ivory. The nameplate above the cradle read Avery, a name she'd chosen alone, the same night she served Marcus the divorce papers. Elise stepped into the room holding 2 mugs of tea. "You're glowing," she said, handing one over. Claire smiled. "Peace looks good on me." "You're due in less than 2 weeks," Elise said. "You nervous?" Claire shook her head slowly. "No. Not anymore. I've prepared everything. Financially. Legally. Emotionally." She looked down at her belly and whispered, "We're going to be just fine." Claire hadn't just survived Marcus's betrayal. She had used it. Every document. Every lie. Every moment of his absence she had converted them into power. But there was still one final piece to play. And Claire wasn't about to leave the game unfinished. The next morning Marcus finally opened the letter. It was a final warning from Diana Gray. "If Mr. Jennings fails to sign by the 30th, our client will file for the legal termination of his parental rights. Any further delay or attempt to delay proceedings will be interpreted as abandonment." There was also a note beneath it, something Diana must have added personally. "She doesn't need your presence. She wanted your respect. Since you gave her neither, she's taking the one thing you thought she never would: your relevance." Marcus threw the letter across the room. His head spun. He needed to see Claire. That afternoon, Marcus showed up at Claire's house uninvited again. This time the porch camera caught everything. He banged on the door, yelling her name, pleading. "Claire, please. I just want to talk. Just 5 minutes." The door remained closed. Then a voice, calm and automated, played through the speaker. "You are in violation of a court-ordered restraining distance. Authorities have been notified." He staggered back, looked up at the camera, then turned and ran. Less than an hour later his attorney called. "You're pushing this too far, Marcus." She filed for an emergency hearing. "If the judge grants it, your visitation rights are gone permanently. You'll have no legal say over your child's life." Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, his hands shaking. He had nothing left. Not Claire. Not the baby. Not his job. Not his home. He was a man with a last name, a driver's license, and a trail of self-inflicted destruction. 2 days later Marcus caved. He signed. Every line. Every clause. Every term Claire demanded. The child support. The supervised visitation. The surrender of any claim on the house. He signed them all. His lawyer faxed the documents to Claire's legal team in silence. No victory speech. No rebuttal. No pride. Just paperwork and quiet surrender. Claire received the documents while at a routine prenatal appointment. When her phone buzzed and Diana confirmed receipt, Claire looked at the monitor beside her, the flickering image of her baby's heartbeat, and smiled. "It's done," she whispered. But her revenge didn't end there. Claire knew that the most devastating revenge wasn't about yelling, fighting, or even taking. It was about erasing. She deleted every trace of Marcus from her life: photos, emails, belongings. His name was removed from the baby registry. Her medical records were updated to reflect her maiden name. Her social media showed no sign of him ever existing. She was reborn. And he had no place in her new chapter. Marcus, meanwhile, tried to piece together a life. He applied for jobs. Got rejected. Word had gotten around about the affair, the scandal, the terminated client contract. He reached out to friends. They didn't respond. He even tried therapy twice. But both sessions ended the same way, with him blaming everyone but himself. He wasn't ready to change. Not yet. And so he sat, alone, waiting for supervised visits that hadn't even started. And then came the message. It was a simple email. From a local community center. Subject: Supervised visitation schedule from Safe Space Family Coordination Services. Marcus clicked it open. The contents were clear. Claire had arranged for Marcus to meet the baby under professional supervision, once a month for 1 hour in a sterile, monitored room. The child would not spend the night with him. He would not be allowed to bring gifts unless pre-approved. He could not post photos. He could not contact Claire directly. If he missed 2 visits, termination proceedings would begin. Marcus stared at the screen, a dull ringing in his ears. This was what he had become. A stranger to his own blood. Claire gave birth 2 weeks later. A girl. Healthy. Beautiful. With wide eyes and a full head of dark hair. She named her Avery Elise Jennings, middle name after her best friend, last name hers alone. When the birth certificate attendant asked about the father's name, Claire smiled gently. He's not in the picture, she said. Back in his apartment, Marcus received a notification. You have a new photo in your visitation portal. He clicked it. It was Avery, wrapped in a pink blanket. Eyes wide, curious, innocent. Below it, the caption Claire had uploaded read, Avery Elise. Born into strife. Raised by truth. Marcus broke. Tears streamed down his face as he dropped the phone. He had lost everything. Not because Claire destroyed him, but because she let him destroy himself. She moved on and he could only watch word count. 2,500 words tone. Psychological tension, silent destruction, and the widening gap between a woman healing and a man unraveling. The first time Marcus saw his daughter was through a one-way mirror. It was a small, sanitized room inside the Safe Space Family Coordination Center. White walls. Soft toys. A neutral couch. Cameras in the corners. Marcus sat in the observation area, wringing his hands, heart pounding in his chest. On the other side of the glass, a woman in a beige uniform entered with a bundled baby in her arms. She was barely a month old, tiny, pink-skinned, wrapped in a lilac blanket. The attendant gently placed the baby into a secure bouncer. She's all ready for Dad, the woman said softly to the camera. Marcus stood frozen as the door buzzed open behind him. He stepped into the visitation room like a prisoner walking into his sentencing. And there she was. Avery. His daughter. His blood. So small. So impossibly perfect. Her dark hair curled slightly at the ends and her eyes, wide and curious, blinked up at the ceiling lights. Marcus approached slowly, afraid to breathe too loud, afraid she'd cry. He didn't. She simply stared at him, blinking, silent. Hey, he whispered, sinking to his knees. Hey, baby girl. His voice cracked. He didn't reach out to touch her. He didn't feel worthy of it. He just sat beside her, watching, breathing in the fragile miracle he had once taken for granted. For 60 minutes, Marcus sang softly. Talked to her about nothing and everything. Told her about clouds and songs and how sorry he was for being a mess. When the timer buzzed, signaling the end of visitation, he felt like the floor dropped beneath him. Can I hold her? He asked. The staff member shook her head gently. First 3 visits must be no contact. After that, it's up to the court liaison. And just like that, Avery was lifted away. Marcus left the building hollowed out. Claire didn't show up to the visit. He never would. All interactions were handled through a custody app. Every message filtered by legal supervision. Claire hadn't spoken to Marcus directly in over 2 months. She hadn't even acknowledged him since the day he'd signed the settlement papers. While Marcus wandered in that purgatory of supervised parenting and lost purpose, Claire bloomed. She had moved quietly, strategically to a neighboring city just outside the county. New home. New zip code. New start. Avery's nursery had a full view of a quiet park. Claire's new office, a remote HR consultant job, gave her both flexibility and independence. She no longer lived beneath Marcus's shadow. And more importantly, she was now impossible to trace. No tagged locations, no address on social media, no breadcrumbs. Her phone was registered under a new carrier. Her banking restructured. Her life now moved through channels Marcus couldn't access. He didn't even know where she lived. One day, while checking the parenting portal for updates, Marcus stumbled upon something unexpected. A photo. Avery, now almost 2 months old, was in a baby carrier, wearing tiny sunglasses and a sun hat. Behind her, a tall man held the stroller handle, his face mostly out of frame. But his presence was clear. He was there. With his daughter. Marcus stared at the image for a full hour, rage boiling in his veins. Claire hadn't posted a caption. But the implications were loud. She had moved on. Already. He threw his phone across the room, shattering it against the floor. Marcus began spiraling again. He started drinking. Not heavily, but enough to miss his next visitation. Then the next one. 2 missed visits triggered a warning. Claire's legal team sent a single notice. 1 more missed appointment and Mr. Jennings' visitation rights will be petitioned for suspension pending psychological review. Marcus panicked. He emailed the center swearing it was a scheduling mistake. Promised to attend the next one. The staff rescheduled the session. One final chance. He showed up, shaved, clean shirt, rehearsed apologies. This time he was allowed to hold Avery. The moment she was placed in his arms, she squirmed, whimpered, clearly unfamiliar. Still, he rocked her, trying to shush her, whispering soft promises. But Avery didn't calm down. She cried harder, louder until the staff had to intervene. Marcus sat back, defeated. The supervisor logged the reaction in her notes. Infant demonstrated emotional distress in father's presence. Bond not yet established. Will reassess next quarter. Marcus left the building choking back sobs. 2 days later, Claire received the report. She read it silently, expression blank. Elise glanced over. You okay? Claire nodded slowly. She doesn't know him. She doesn't feel safe. That's not on you, Elise said gently. That's on him. Claire didn't reply. She simply closed the file and turned toward the window, watching Avery nap peacefully in her bassinet. Claire didn't hate Marcus. Not anymore. He pitied him. And that, perhaps, was worse. Because now he was just a ghost. An echo. A man watching a life that used to be his, but now belonged only to memory. But Marcus wasn't done making mistakes. One night, in a fit of bitterness, he created a burner Twitter account. He started tweeting things like, "My ex-wife turned my daughter against me. Men get no rights in custody battles. All I wanted was a second chance. She ruined me." His tweets gained traction among certain corners of the internet, sympathy from strangers who didn't know the full story. Until one day someone did. An anonymous user replied with, "Didn't you cheat on your pregnant wife with your client and skip every ultrasound? She didn't turn your daughter against you. She just stopped you from infecting her with your selfishness." The tweet went viral. Screenshots of court documents surfaced. The leaked Slack messages from his old company were posted. His narrative crumbled. The sympathy dried up. Even the echo chamber abandoned him. Meanwhile, Claire was building something new. During a local networking event, she reconnected with an old college friend, Adam Blake. Adam had always been kind, stable, warm. He now ran a boutique marketing firm in the city. They started grabbing coffee once a week. Then lunch. Then weekend walks with Avery. He never pushed. Never asked about Marcus. He simply showed up. Avery began smiling when he was around. She giggled when he made silly faces. She dozed peacefully on his chest during long walks. Claire noticed. And for the first time since the betrayal, she allowed herself to hope. Not just for love but for peace. Marcus found out months later through a mutual acquaintance. "Did you hear Claire's seeing someone?" they said casually. "Guy named Adam. Super nice. Works in marketing." Marcus pretended not to care. But that night he drank until he passed out on the floor. At the next supervised visit, Avery didn't cry. But she didn't smile either. She just stared at Marcus with cautious, unreadable eyes. When he tried to kiss her forehead, she pulled away, eyes squinting. The supervisor logged it. Minimal progress in bond. Father may benefit from parenting education and psychological support. Marcus signed the visitor log, head bowed. That night, Claire received a message on the parenting app. "I want to try harder. Please let me be in her life." Marcus, she didn't respond. Not with words. Instead, she uploaded a new photo to the portal. Avery, smiling in a field of flowers. Claire holding her. Adam beside them. A complete family. One Marcus would never be part of. Marcus hits bottom. Claire reclaims the final piece of her life, his name. Marcus Jennings hadn't opened his blinds in 2 weeks. He sat in the dim light of his apartment, staring at the court evaluation report from his last supervised visit. It lay open on his coffee table, next to a stack of unopened bills and a collection notice from his old firm's legal department. Minimal bonding progress. Child exhibits no attachment. Father fails to display consistent emotional regulation. Every line was a blow. But the last note cut deepest. Recommends suspension of visits if no progress by next quarter. His visitation with Avery was hanging by a thread, and no one, not the staff, not Claire, not the courts, was on his side anymore. All because of his own mistakes. And now he was about to lose something else. Something he hadn't even thought Claire would touch. Across town, Claire stood in front of her attorney's desk, papers in hand. "I want to file a petition to change Avery's last name," she said firmly. Diana Gray didn't even flinch. "To your maiden name?" Claire nodded. "Jennings doesn't belong to her. Not anymore." Diana tapped her pen thoughtfully. "You're within your rights. He hasn't exercised consistent visitation. The court already documented a lack of bond, and the father's history of abandonment will support your case. But..." Claire looked up. "But..." "Marcus will contest it. Not because he cares, but because it's the last piece of control he thinks he has." Claire inhaled deeply. "Then let him fight. I'll still win." The petition was filed quietly. It didn't even reach Marcus until a week later, when a thin white envelope slipped under his apartment door. At first he thought it was more debt. Then he read the top line, "Notice of petition to change the legal name of a minor." He stared at the name written inside. From Avery Elise Jennings to Avery Elise Monroe, Claire's maiden name. He read it over and over, disbelief turning to fury. He picked up his phone, rage bubbling in his chest, and dialed the only number he was still allowed to use, the parenting app's message portal. "Marcus, you're really going to take my name from her? She's my daughter too. You don't get to erase me." Claire saw the message late that night. She didn't respond with anger. Just one line. "Claire, you erased yourself the day you chose another woman over your own child. I'm just finishing what you started." 2 weeks later, Marcus filed an objection with the court. He had no lawyer. Couldn't afford one. In his desperation, he wrote his own defense. That he loved his daughter. That he was working on himself. That he wanted to be present. That a name change would damage the father-child connection. Claire's attorney submitted a 60-page rebuttal, detailing his repeated absences, the missed visits, the documented lack of bonding, the viral social media meltdown that had painted him in a terrible light. Claire also submitted a letter. It was short but devastating. Avery deserves a last name connected to safety, stability, and love. Her current name ties her to abandonment, to emotional neglect. It ties her to a man who held her for 3 minutes, then vanished for months. A name should not be a reminder of pain. It should be a promise of protection. I intend to keep that promise. Claire Monroe. The day of the hearing, Marcus showed up in a wrinkled shirt and worn shoes. The courtroom was half empty. Just the judge, Claire, her lawyer, and a court officer. Claire didn't even look at him. When the judge asked if he had any final words, Marcus stood, fumbling through a folded note. His voice trembled. "I was a bad husband, but I want to be a better father. I'm trying. Taking classes. Therapy. I know I've made mistakes, but please, don't take my name away from her. It's all I have left." He looked directly at Claire for the first time in months. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know it's too late for us, but not for her. Please." Claire didn't flinch. She didn't cry. When the judge asked her if she wished to respond, she stood and simply said, "Your Honor, everything that needed to be said is already in the file. My daughter will grow up knowing who raised her. That's the only name that matters." The judge took 5 minutes. When he returned, he didn't even pause. "The petition to change the minor's legal surname from Jennings to Monroe is granted." Marcus sank into his seat. Claire gathered her things, nodded politely to the judge, and walked out. She didn't look back. Later that night, Marcus sat alone in his apartment, the court order on the table. He stared at the words, "Name change approved." Then at the attached copy of the updated birth certificate. His name was no longer listed under legal father. It had been replaced with a note, non-custodial, parental rights limited. He had no power, no legacy, no more illusions. His daughter didn't even carry his name anymore. She was Monroe now, like her mother, a symbol of survival, of power, of moving on. Meanwhile, Claire sat on the balcony of her new apartment, Avery asleep on her chest. Adam was beside her, reading a book, one hand resting lightly on Claire's knee. The evening breeze blew gently. Peaceful. Safe. Claire glanced at Avery and whispered softly, "You're free now." Marcus Jennings stood in the middle of a crowded sidewalk, a single flyer crumpled in his hand. His eyes flickered up to the storefront in front of him, a modest community center with a small, tasteful banner stretched across its windows. Modern Parenting for Modern Fathers Workshop Series. He was 37. Once a respected manager at a marketing firm. Once a man with a wife who trusted him and a child on the way. Now, he was a participant. A project in recovery. Marcus exhaled and stepped inside. It was his 3rd session. Court mandated after the parenting coordinator recommended therapy, classes, and emotional management training before he could reapply for expanded visitation. He had no job. His savings were nearly drained. His daughter didn't carry his name anymore. But somehow the worst part of it all. Claire hadn't even looked at him during the last hearing. Not once. He'd watched her, composed, radiant, calm, cradle their daughter and walk out of that courtroom like he was a stranger on the street. Like he never even existed. The class was led by a soft-spoken man named Greg who had once lost custody himself and rebuilt from nothing. Greg talked about accountability, choices, showing up. Marcus listened, mostly silent. He didn't know if he believed in second chances anymore, but something inside him whispered that if he could just prove he was trying, Claire might. Maybe someday. Let him in again. Not for her. But for Avery. Maybe. Across town, Claire was sitting on a picnic blanket in the park, laughing as Avery toddled a few steps in the grass. She was 11 months old now, full of energy and light. Adam sat beside her holding 2 iced coffees. He watched Claire with a softness that made even strangers smile. Avery waddled over and plopped into Claire's lap. She wrapped her arms around her baby and kissed the top of her head. She said, "Yesterday," Claire whispered to Adam. He looked surprised. "Really?" Claire nodded slowly. "But I didn't correct her. Because she said it while looking at you." Adam blinked. "Do you want me to pull back?" Claire shook her head. "No. He feels safe with you. She smiles more when you're around. That's what matters." They sat in silence as the sun filtered through the trees, wrapping them in golden peace. That evening, Marcus opened the parenting app and saw the newest photo Claire had uploaded. Avery in the park, standing on wobbly legs, arms raised. Claire and Adam on either side of her holding her hands. The perfect family photo. Except he wasn't in it. Marcus stared at it for a long time. And then he made a decision. He showed up. Not to Claire's house. He didn't know the address anymore. But to the park. He'd seen the location tag by accident weeks ago when the community parenting app auto-synced with Claire's calendar entry. It was a fluke. A careless moment on her part. Still, he took it as a sign. He went there often. So he waited. Claire had just finished feeding Avery her snack when she heard her name. Soft. Hesitant. She turned. Marcus stood 20 feet away. Unshaven. Dark circles under his eyes. A worn hoodie hanging off his frame. "Claire. Please. I just want to talk." Her heart didn't skip. Her face didn't even twitch. She picked up Avery and held her protectively. "You're violating a no-contact boundary," she said calmly. "Leave." "I've changed. I've been doing everything the court asked," Marcus said, his voice cracking. I miss her. I miss you. And I know I destroyed us, but please." "Claire, just hear me, Marcus," she said, firm now. "If you come one step closer, I'll call the police." He froze. "I'm not trying to scare you," he pleaded. "Just one chance. A real one. Let me be a father. Let me." "You were given chance after chance," she snapped quietly. "You weren't just a bad husband. You were a coward. And now you're a stranger to your daughter." Avery clung to her, sensing the tension. "She says then now," Marcus whispered, tears welling. "Please don't let her grow up not knowing who I am." Claire's stare cut through him. "She'll grow up knowing the man who raised her. Not the man who disappeared." Then without another word she turned and walked away. Marcus stood in the middle of the park, watched her disappear into the distance, her silhouette radiant and unwavering. For the first time he realized there was no coming back. Not even a sliver of the door left open. She wasn't just gone. She had moved on. Without him. That night Marcus wrote one last message in the parenting app. "Marcus, I'm sorry. For everything. I hope someday she'll forgive me. I won't contact you again. I promise." He waited for a reply. None came. 2 days later his account was restricted. All visitation was moved to quarterly review. All further communication had to go through a court liaison. He was officially out. Weeks passed. Months. Claire's life moved forward like a river in motion. Avery's first birthday was a small garden celebration. She took her first real steps on video. Adam stood beside Claire, holding her hand as Avery wobbled toward them both, giggling with triumph. Claire watched the footage that night, smiling through tears. She wasn't broken anymore. She wasn't surviving. She was living. Free. Whole. And beautifully done with the past. Marcus watched from the outside. A quiet follower of the parenting portal. An observer of what could have been. Until one day the portal showed nothing at all. Claire had requested permanent restriction. Avery's photos, updates, milestones gone. Just like Claire. Just like her love. Just like his name. Claire completes her journey of healing. Marcus faces a life emptied by his own choices. The world didn't explode when Claire removed Marcus from the emergency contact list at Avery's pediatrician's office. The nurse just smiled, nodded, and clicked a few buttons. "That's all set," she said. Claire thanked her, lifting Avery onto her hip. She was 18 months old now, curious, chubby-cheeked, and obsessed with saying "Mama" every time Claire entered the room. Outside the clinic, Adam waited beside the car, scrolling through something on his phone. Claire slid into the passenger seat, placed Avery in her car seat and paused. That name, Marcus Jennings, had been a shadow in every document, lurking like a legal echo. No, just a ghost. And it felt like the final weight was gone. Marcus didn't find out until 3 weeks later. He'd called the clinic to ask about Avery's next vaccination date, and the receptionist said the record couldn't be released. Why? He asked. You're not listed on the file anymore, she replied. What do you mean? I'm her father. There's no active parental authorization under your name. He hung up without another word. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat in silence. Because deep down he knew this was inevitable. He wasn't part of her life anymore. Not really. He hadn't been in a long time. Claire hadn't intended to build her life with Adam. Not at first. She'd resisted every advance, every offer to help. She had promised herself never to fall into another man's orbit. But Adam never pulled her in. He never pushed. He simply walked beside her. Day after day. She began to notice how Avery responded to him, giggling when he entered the room, reaching for his hands, curling up against him during naps. And then she began to notice herself, how she smiled more, how she laughed again. How her silence was no longer lonely, just peaceful. It didn't happen quickly. It happened quietly. And in the quiet she rebuilt everything. The proposal came on a Sunday morning. They had just finished breakfast. Avery was watching cartoons in her pajamas, still munching on the toast Claire had cut into heart shapes. Adam brought Claire coffee, kissed her forehead and said, I've been thinking about something. She looked up, smiling. I want to raise her. With you. Not just help. Not just be the guy who shows up sometimes. Claire stared, speechless. I love her. But I love you more. And I want to grow old in a home that isn't haunted by what came before. I want this, us. Then he slid a small velvet box across the table. Inside was a simple gold band. No flash. No spectacle. Just sincerity. Claire looked at Avery, then at Adam. And nodded. Marcus found out through Elise. Or rather, through Elise's Instagram story, which someone had screen recorded and sent to him anonymously. It was only 5 seconds long. No tags. No names. But it showed Claire laughing in a garden, wearing a white sundress, twirling Avery in the air as Adam stepped into the frame with a cake that said, she said yes. Marcus watched it on repeat. She didn't look like the woman he remembered. She looked lighter. Softer. Happier. And it wasn't a performance. It was real. The parenting portal hadn't shown a single update in 5 months. No photos. No schedules. Not even a message. And then finally it happened. He received an email from the court liaison. Subject: Final review of visitation status. Marcus opened it, hands trembling. Inside was the summary. No visitation attended in last 3 quarters. No documented effort to re-engage with mandated therapy. Repeated boundary violations and public disturbances. No established bond with the child. Recommendation: visitation rights suspended indefinitely. Reinstatement available only through court appeal and intensive psychological review. Marcus stared at the screen for over an hour. There were no tears. Just a terrible stillness. He had lost everything. And there was no dramatic moment, no explosion. Just a file. A decision. A woman who simply chose not to fight. Claire never told Avery about Marcus, at least not yet. He would someday. But for now Avery knew 2 things. That Mama was her best friend and that Daddy was a man who made her pancakes, kissed her boo-boos and danced with her during rainstorms. She didn't ask questions. Because her life wasn't missing anything. Claire had made sure of that. The wedding was small. A garden ceremony. Just a few friends. Elise stood beside Claire holding her bouquet. Avery served as the flower girl, sprinkling white petals down the aisle as everyone clapped and laughed. Claire walked toward Adam wearing a white dress that symbolized freedom, not fairy tales. When she reached him she didn't cry. She smiled. Because she knew, this time she wasn't falling in love. She was walking into it eyes open. Somewhere in a 1-bedroom apartment across the city, Marcus saw the wedding photos when someone tagged Elise. He clicked the link. Claire radiant. Adam beaming. Avery growing fast, curls bouncing, smiling wide. And in every photo, a life he would never touch again. Not even the edges. Not even in memory. He closed the tab. Turned off the light. And sat in the dark. Claire, now Claire Monroe Blake, lived the life she had always deserved. Not because she had sought revenge. Not because she had punished Marcus with fire. But because she chose herself. Because she didn't scream. She didn't break down. She didn't burn his world. She simply left it, took what mattered, and never looked back. And that silence, that peace was the deepest revenge of all. Think.